Previously on Project Hail Andy.
Hello Dennis, my name's Andy Weir and I'm the author of The Martian, Artemis, and Project Hail Mary. So basically what I was hoping for would be for you to come up with some custom versions of my books for me.
Hi everybody, Dennis here. Welcome back. If you recall, I was about to get started on making some cases. These will be hardcover books, of course, so I'll get started by breaking down some 2mm grayboard. These strips are about 6 inches wide and are long grain. I can now use my chopper to cut each of the cover boards to length. I'll cut the first board, and then I'll use it to set up a temporary stop. I can then make short work of trimming the other boards to length. I want to smooth the transitions from the front and back of the books to the spines, so I'm beveling the shoulder edge of each board with a block plane. It's important the plane blade be razor sharp in order for this technique to work, but properly honed, it leaves a decent finish. As a final step, I'll ease all of the edges with some sandpaper. Often in case bindings, the boards get glued directly to the covering material, with appropriate spaces left for the spine and the hinges. What I have in mind won't really allow for that, so I'm going to pre-make the substructure of the cases first, and then the cases and coverings will be brought together later. I'll prepare spine stiffeners from this thin 0.6mm board. Some temporary spacers will help me position the boards in the next step. To assemble the cases, I'll use this 25% cotton paper. It should be strong enough to join the boards and stiffener, and still be thin enough to live underneath the covering material. This PVA glue grabs fast enough for me to handle these pretty much right away, but I'll still stack them up under some weight to dry. An hour or so later, I'll glue on the spine stiffeners, leaving 6mm to form the hinges. At the time, I thought this would be plenty, but little did I know that this would cause me some trouble down the line. But that's later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. My spacers do double duty as fillers to put pressure right on the spine strips. I'll slip the text blocks into their cases to check the fit, and they look good. It makes me feel a little bit better having some protection on those text blocks too. The pre-made cases will also prove to be handy full-scale templates as I continue working on my design concepts. I really need to nail those down before I start in earnest on the covers, so it's time to sharpen my pencil again. By this time I've got a pretty good idea of the direction I want to go, but just for good measure, I sketched out a few other ideas to see if I like them better. It did prove useful, and soon I was ready to go full scale with my 3 final designs. My general concept is to depict a scene from each of the books in a full wraparound design. For The Martian, I'm doing a satellite view of Mark Watney's rover journey across the planet, which of course was a big part of the book. Artemis will be a monochrome panoramic moonscape, with the namesake moon base far in the distance on the back cover. Project Hail Mary will show the Petrova line spiraling between Tau Ceti and planet Adrian. If you haven't read the book, that probably doesn't make much sense, but if you're a fan, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, I could keep working on these and refining them all day long, but I need to remember that I'm not illustrating these books, I'm binding them. And so I need to find a way to get my drawings off of paper and made up in leather. Now, to do that, I want to use a technique that's called leather mosaic. You can think of it like a puzzle, where different colors of leather are cut out into little pieces and then reassembled onto the covers of the books. To do that, I'm going to need a template to cut out all the little bits. And I could use these, but I'm going to need more than one copy of each template, and so a better idea will be to take these in and scan them. That way I can get the drawings into the computer, I can clean up all the lines and make refinements, and then I can print out as many copies as I want. I'm not the best at Photoshop, and it's going to take a little bit of extra time, but it's better than chopping up my originals. With my sketches digitized, I was able to add color to my shapes, define the lines, and smooth out the curves. For the Martian and Hail Mary, I printed line drawing versions, while Artemis I did in grayscale. Back in the bindery, I'm going to get started in publication order, so I'll get to work on the Martian first. My plan for this one is to create some real texture to help convey the topography of Mars. I made a mock-up as a proof of concept which has these contour lines underneath the leather. I made those by building up layers of the same 6mm card that I used for the spine stiffeners. And this is where my scale printouts will really come in handy. In this case, I'll use it as a template to transfer the shapes to the cardstock. I'll transfer those lines onto the cardstock using a piece of old-school carbon paper. Numbering each one will help me to keep the pieces in order as they look nearly identical. I'll then cut out each one, holding the knife at a slight angle to give each contour a slight bevel. I'm also keeping the offcuts as they'll have a use later. To minimize warping, I chose to use a spray adhesive to attach the layers. I found that water-based adhesives like PVA caused significant warping, so the spray was my solution. It's rather vile stuff though, so I don't think I'll be replacing my glue brush anytime soon. I'll give that a strong nip in the press to ensure good contact before moving on to the next layers. That looks good, so now it's just lather, rinse, and repeat. The extra layers are a bit oversized, so I'll trim the excess on the top and bottom edges. And here along the hinge, I'll first trim the excess, then bevel the extra layers to match the main boards. With the spine folded away, it's really no different than working on a loose board. And there we have it, a sample of Martian geology. Off camera, I glued together the offcuts, which I'll use to fill up the negative spaces whenever I press the case for the various stages of the process. The first of those will be lining the boards. As I'll be covering these with leather, I want to pre-line the boards in anticipation of the warping from the drying leather. This is the same 25% cotton paper that I used for the case construction. I'm using PVA methyl cell mix here, and I'll line the infill paper right up to the existing one. That lining paper will pre-warp the boards inward as it dries, but later the leather will pull it back in the other direction. While that's in the press, I'll go ahead and line the insides of the cases for the other two books. Here I'm prepping Project Hail Mary, while Artemis got done off camera. With the bones of the cases done, it's time to get going on the real work. Since I'll be using a mosaic technique, I'll need quite a few colors of leather, and of course, that's then multiplied by 3. This terracotta color, for example, will be the main material for the Martian. This white leather is alum tawed goatskin. It was hard to source, and even harder on the pocketbook, but it's just the thing for what I have in mind for Artemis. I started sourcing these back on mission day number 3, and there are still a few yet to arrive, but I have what we need to get going on the Martian. I've got this rusty orange you saw just now as the primary material. To that I'll add this lighter brown, and then a bit of this sandy orange. Longtime viewers might recognize this leather. It's left over from my dune binding, so it'll be a cool little tie-in for Andy. Once again, my full-scale printout will be invaluable, this time to cut out the various parts of the mosaic. I've split the template to allow more room for the hinges, and taped some bits around the edges to show the turn-ins. I'll get started with the base leather, which won't extend all the way to the southeast and northwest corners, so I need to cut around those. For the next color, I mark a dotted line to leave a bit of material where I'll need to thin and overlap the pieces. On the other side, I cut right to the line, as that part will overlap the lower piece. It's a bit confusing, I know, but it'll make a little bit more sense soon. The cutout for the final leather needn't be too precise, as it'll be onlaid on top and not have to match up to anything else. This piece has a prominent scar, which I rejected for Dune, but for this project it'll just add to the texture, so I'm going to put it right on the front cover. Here you can get an idea of how the pieces will work together. Cutting them out was the easy part though. Now I need to pare and thin them all, both to turn in around the boards, and especially along the edges where the pieces will overlap. So I better get to it. My preferred work surface is a lithography stone, though tempered glass or marble would work too. The litho stone was a standby in old binderies though, and I'm lucky enough to have 2 of them. My weapon of choice is a paring knife, left-handed of course. It has a single bevel that's razor sharp, and it needs frequent stropping to maintain that edge. In paring, the underside of the blade sort of skates along the smooth, hard surface of the stone, allowing me to pare the leather to a feather edge. Lowering the angle of the knife and working back from the edge gives me a better angle to thin the leather, which will then mold more easily around the contoured boards. A spoke shave is another invaluable tool at this stage for making smooth, wide bevels for the turn-ins. It's a finicky process in which care must be taken not to put any stray holes in either the leather or myself, so I take my time. The main piece of leather has plenty of areas that need work, but I give each of them their due attention. Doing otherwise would just cause me grief later. I realized I have too much material for the turn-ins underneath the rough leather where it's doubled up, so I'll cut back the base leather underneath so I only have to turn in 1. It's a pity I already pared these edges, but that's a minor gripe. Trying to turn in 2 layers would be a little bit much, so I think this is for the best. With all the paring done, it's now time to get these pieces attached to the boards. Moistening the hair side of the leather with some water will soften it for molding around the contours. As usual, I'll be using paste to attach the leather. This is wheat starch paste, which I cooked up myself, and if you're interested, I'll put the instructions in the video description. As the paste has a long drying time, I can apply it to all of the pieces to give it time to penetrate. I'll reapply more as needed. This will be a relatively long process after all, so that slow-acting paste is a must. I'll also put some paste on the board for good measure. The leather does tend to dry out a bit, so I'll damp it down with a sponge to keep it supple. Now I'll work the edge of the leather into the first contour line, and you can see the benefit of paring it so thin. It allows the damp leather to mold perfectly to that raised edge. I can now trim the corner and turn in the 2 outer edges. Apart from the irregular shape, This is really no different than a traditional leather corner. Where the turn-ins overlap, I'll make a 45-degree cut through both of them at the same time. That way I can remove the excess to make a perfect joint. The thin material at the corner can then be massaged and molded to make a tidy corner. The next layer slightly overlaps the first, but is otherwise molded into place the same way. With the crater on the back cover done, I'll move to the front and do the corresponding one there. Attaching the main piece will take a bit more finagling to get into place, but because I'm using paste, I can take my time and reposition the leather as necessary. And it will be necessary because, despite my care in cutting to my template, I still need to fine-tune around the contour lines. If I had attempted this with PVA glue, I'd be out of luck. I'll finish up turning in this board before I move on to the other one. The final layer will be applied directly on top of the main ground leather, which I hope will add to the sense of depth that I'm trying to create. The turn-ins and corners then get finished in the same manner. I'll do one final check to see that everything's in place, and then I'll put the whole thing into the press to dry. Okay, that's looking pretty cool. It'll be a good foundation for tooling later. Next up on the bench, Artemis. My approach for Artemis will be somewhat different. I'll need two colors of leather to make up the ground layer for my design. I'll start by cutting a piece of this smooth black goatskin for the sky portion. I only printed a wide black line on my template just to show the horizon and to save on ink. The stuff's expensive after all. I'm cutting about a 1/4 inch below the horizon line, as I'll need the extra material to bevel the leather. The main foreground of the design will be white, which this alum-tawed goatskin will be perfect for. Tawing, as I understand it, is similar to tanning, except it uses alum instead of chrome or tannin. What's important to me is the finished color, or lack of color, I guess. Here I'm cutting directly along the transition, as I'll bevel the back edge of the white leather to overlap the black. Put together, you can already get an idea of the lunar moonscape with the starless sky in the background. Now I just need to join these two pieces together. To do that, I'll bevel the edges as I said, and then I'll glue them together to make what's effectively one piece. Unlike when I pair the turn-in areas, I'm only doing a single short bevel here. This join only needs to hold together through the Mosaic process. Once these pieces are pasted to the cover boards, they won't be going anywhere. I paired the back side of the white leather, so I'll make the corresponding bevel on the front side of the black. For this application, I'm using PVA instead of paste, as this is a straightforward join, and I want the fast action of that synthetic glue. Paste would work, but I don't want to wait 8 hours until it's cured. After an hour, the glue is dry, and I've got myself a two-tone base leather to build upon. Once again, my prefab cases come in handy to mark out the turn-ins. And unlike with the Martian, I can treat this as a single piece of leather for the purposes of paring those down. With the two pieces joined, it'll be a simple thing to keep them even at the transitions. My goal is to create a wide bevel, reducing the thickness from just inside the edge of the board to near zero at the edges. My spoke shave proved to be exceptionally handy for this. To create the Mosaic, I'll need several different colors of leather. I've got a few different shades of gray here that should work well to achieve my monochrome design. As they are though, they're too thick for my needs, so I'll cut out a few swatches to thin down. To do that though, I'll need something other than my paring knife to get the job done. The best way to reduce the leather pieces to a minimum thickness is to use this skiving tool. It has an adjustable razor blade that can split the leather right down the middle. It takes some practice and fine-tuning to get it right, but it provides a more consistent finish than either the knife or the spoke shave. It can handle about an inch of material at a time, so for wider pieces I'll make multiple passes. Here I've reduced the thickness from about 1.3 millimeters to just 0.4. Each type of leather behaves differently when doing this, so I take my time and I change the blade frequently. Mistakes can and do happen, which is why I've prepped more swatches than I need. I'll just cut around any tears. That should be enough to work with, so time to get started on the Mosaic. I'll not start cutting out the pieces directly though. On its own, the leather can stretch quite a lot, and I need to cut precise shapes in order to achieve the pattern. So first, I'll cut out my paper template, and then I'll paste the pieces directly to the hair side of the leather. This will hide the color of the leather, but the tones of my printout will help me keep track of what I'm doing. And for those who are wondering or may have asked in the past, my inkjet printer uses pigment-based inks, which are basically waterproof, so they won't bleed out from the moisture in the paste. Those will need to dry though, so I'll get started on the Mosaic tomorrow. Okay, I've got all my little bits of leather, but I need a way to position them accurately so they make the final image. To do that, I'll use some tape to temporarily attach yet another of my printouts to the base leather. I'll line up the horizon line, and then I can make impressions through the paper to show where to apply the pieces. My brass stylus is perfect for this. I haven't heated it as I would for tooling, I just need to make a faint impression to guide me. The technique I'll be using is called onlay, because the mosaic pieces are literally laid on top of the ground leather. The other technique, inlay, puts the pieces into corresponding holes that are cut right in. Next, I'll cut out the corresponding piece. I do my best to follow the lines, but it's only critical in those areas where 2 or more pieces touch. The turn-in area gets a quick shave. I'll then cut out the adjacent piece. I'm cutting them as I go, mainly to stay organized. Some of these bits are tiny after all. I realized here that I needed material for the turn-in, so this piece has a bit of a tail. To prep the base leather, I apply a bit of water with a reusable marker. As with the Martian, I'm using wheat starch paste for all of the onlaid pieces. Applying them is simple, just get them in position and then press them in place. I do my best to make sure that the adjoining edges are tight together. The paper's done its job and it's coming away anyway, so I'll remove it and then further press the pieces with a polishing iron. I can really bear down with this tool to get lots of pressure. The idea is to crush the onlaid pieces into the underlying layer, with the goal being to have the mosaic and the background to be all the same thickness. Achieving that will require another process later, so for now I'll get as many of these applied as I can before putting the whole thing into the press. The next day the onlays are all dry, but they're still sitting a bit proud of the base layer. To mitigate that, I need to work on the back side and use a technique called back paring. For that, my spoke shave is the tool of choice. The sole of the spoke shave will ride over any high spots, paring down only those areas where the onlays were applied. I need to be careful not to cut too deeply, but if I'm lucky, the net result will be leather that's all one thickness. In this way, I can also clean up the transition between the black and white leather. There's one more element to onlay which I've left for last. Here in my sketch, you can see moon base Artemis off in the distance. I've prepped some black and white leather with paper templates so I can make this element. It's a key part of my design, so hopefully I can make it work. The white leather will be a single base piece. It's these little black shadows of the domes that are going to be tricky. That went pretty smoothly. I'll just get it in the press with a couple of steel blocks on top to really concentrate the pressure where I need it. Well, my little moon base looks okay, but turns out that I've put it in the wrong place. I was supposed to leave a 25mm turn in here and then a gap and then have moon base Artemis over here. So what to do? I think what I can do is use another color of leather and cover this area with another little mountain range, and then I'll have to redo the base and place that over here where it's supposed to be. Wouldn't be a 4 keys video if I didn't screw something up, right? Oh well. As it turns out, the light gray leather wasn't very porous and the paste didn't adhere that well anyway. I'll pull the whole thing off in one piece. I should be able to reuse it. To make sure that my patch piece sticks well, I scrape the layer below to give the paste something to grab to. I did the same thing for Moonbase Artemis. In fact, I removed the entire top layer of the leather, so this is almost an inlay rather than an onlay. Then, it's back in the press for a few more hours. That's the onlays done. The rest of the tooling can be finished once the leather's on the case. This paste out should be much more straightforward than the Martian. That's the plan, at least. Hopefully these overlapping layers won't give me too much trouble. I let the first layer of paste penetrate, then scrape away the excess and reapply. This multi-stage application takes extra time, but ensures a strong bond to the boards. Well, that went about as smoothly as I could have hoped. Now, into the press. Then it'll be 2 down, 1 to go. For Project Hail Mary, we're starting simple with a full piece of black leather. All the elements of the design will then be built upon this background. As before, I'll take the time to pare down all the edges for the turn-ins. The first element to work on will be Planet Adrian, here on the corner of the front cover. That will be constructed in leather mosaic, but as this element has so many adjoining edges, I'm going to try a different technique to make sure that they all fit together perfectly. First though, I need to prep some more leather, and as the planet is described as being green in the book, that's the palette that I'm going with. The sharp-eyed among you will notice that this Planet Adrian is different than the original one shown earlier. I took the time to redesign it and to add more detail and better depict it as an alien planet. It's a bit more ambitious design for sure, but hopefully it won't prove to be too big of a challenge. I'm not using a color printout this time, so we won't really see the design until the paper is removed. Rather than attach these directly to the black leather, I mean instead to construct a sort of mosaic patch, which I can then paste onto the cover leather as a single piece. As a temporary surface, I've prepared this piece of grey board, which I've sprayed with adhesive that is now dry and only lightly tacky. Next time I think I'll do that outside. Anyway, this is meant to make a temporary adhesive that'll keep my pieces from slipping out of place as I work on them. By positioning 2 adjoining pieces slightly overlapped, I can make one cut along the line, cutting through both of them at once. The result should be a perfect join. At least that's the plan. It worked on my test pieces, so I'm reasonably confident. The waist portion of the lower piece gets peeled away to finish. The delicate stripes of the planet will be tricky, but the principle is the same. If a piece shifts out of position or I slip up with the blade, I'll at best ruin a piece. So I take my time and focus, taking it one step or a cut at a time. These spots that are fully enclosed with another color can be done in the same way, except I use some tape to hold them in place to make the incisions. I just then need to swap one cutout for the other. To join all these together into a single patch, I'll cut yet another printout and paste it over top of everything. I could have used a blank piece of paper here, but I want to hold off on cutting the radius of the planet until everything's pasted together. This way I can follow that line on the printout. That then goes into the press to dry, and when it comes out, it will be a single piece to work with rather than a dozen fiddly bits. The only hurdle is getting the patch off of the background board. Luckily, letting the spray adhesive dry first means that it isn't very strong, so I should be able to peel it back without too much difficulty. There we go, that wasn't too bad. There are a few board fibers still stuck in places, but a bit of water should soften those up enough to remove. Finally, I'll carefully make the final cut along the planet's perimeter. I considered finding something to use as a guide, but I didn't have anything with a large enough arc, so freehand it is. And as always, the turn-in areas will need paring down. The second onlay will be the spiraling Petrova line. If you haven't read the book, it's basically an interplanetary organism that travels between a planet and its host star, which in this case is Tau Ceti, which I've depicted on the back cover. Anyway, I want to make this in a single piece from this red leather, which I think is just big enough. The process is the same as before, though I'm not going to skive down the red leather as I've only got this one piece to work with, and I don't want to risk tearing it. Luckily, it's quite thin already at about 1 millimeter. That's dry, so I now have the unenviable task of freehand cutting about 6 feet of graceful spiral, without suddenly rendering it ungraceful, if you know what I mean. I don't think I breathed the entire time, but I got there, and the offcut looks pretty cool all on its own. As I said, I don't want to risk skiving this thinner, but I will pare the edges to help those blend into the background a bit better. Applying these is pretty much the same as the onlays on Artemis, though I will take the time to scuff up this black leather with some sandpaper. This will roughen the otherwise smooth surface of the leather and will make for a better bond with the paste. Pasting out the patch is no different than a single piece. There won't be enough time or moisture in the paste to separate the paper from the leather, so I don't have to worry about it falling apart. To impress the patch into the ground leather, I'll use a pressing tin, which is just a piece of galvanized sheet metal. It's more rigid than the pressing boards and will deliver more force from the press. A smaller board on top will also focus the pressure just where I want it. That did a good job, so now I can work on prepping to attach my spiral. As I did with Artemis, I'll mark the position of the onlay by tracing through a template. Once again, I'll back pair the leather to even out the overall thickness. The area behind Planet Adrian is larger than the sole of the spoke shave, so I need to take care to remove a consistent amount of material without gouging. The Petrova line, on the other hand, is an ideal candidate for back pairing, which is good, as this will go a long way to compensate for the thicker leather. Now I just need to get the template paper off of there, which requires moisture to soften the paste. Rather than plain water, I'm going to go with a water-based gel, which is simply methyl cellulose. I keep some in the bindery at all times, and longtime viewers will know that I mainly use it as an additive to slow down the action of PVA glue. In this case, its viscosity will help it stay where I put it, while delivering the moisture that I need to remove the paper. With 2 layers of paper, Planet Adrian takes a bit longer. I reapply the methyl cell as needed to loosen up any stubborn spots. A wipe down with fresh water will remove any excess methyl cell, and I'm really happy with how that turned out. And that's now ready to paste onto the cover. So while I get down to pasting, I thought I'd share a little anecdote. Those of you who are members of my Patreon page already know this, but when Andy Weir first contacted me about this project, he inquired as to what my commission fee would be. Now, as a rule, I usually politely decline any such inquiries. I find it challenging enough keeping on top of my own projects without taking on any other obligations. But in this case, he really got my attention with the whole total creative control thing, and, being Andy Weir. So I made him a counter-offer. I would make his books for him at no charge, provided he would make a cameo in my videos. And, well, I think you can guess how that turned out. Anyway, I'm sharing this little tale in part to answer a frequent question that came up in the comments on part 1, as to whether or not Andy's paying me. I think I've answered that, but to be clear, he is not. And to preempt the natural follow-up question of, why? Well, the answer is simple. I don't need it. I'm fortunate enough to have an amazing group of supporters, including you, who are still here enjoying the video, as well as those who go above and beyond by contributing to the channel, whether that be by buying a cup of coffee, sending a tip, or becoming a member on Patreon. The bottom line is that I just want to make books and videos and share my art. It's viewers like you that make that possible. And for that, I thank you, truly. That creative control is the greatest gift that an artist can receive. And I owe that not only to Andy, but to every one of you. Thank you. Okay, back to the book binding. Fresh out of the press, and this case is looking really good. Let's introduce it to the text block, shall we? Well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is that I've got the leather onto all 3 covers and they're dry now, and I've been able to put the text blocks in to test fit them. The bad news is things are feeling a little bit snug. For Project Hail Mary and Artemis, I found that I've really got just a very small 4-edge square here at the front. The text block is just a little bit back from the edge of the front cover. I think once everything gets pasted in place, that'll work because there's a little bit of wiggle room in there. Not so with the Martian. This book, the text block, is basically right flush with the front of the covers. I don't know if that's a function of the extra leather that I put on the spine here, or maybe something shifted out of place, but it just doesn't fit, and that's not acceptable to me. So I'm gonna have to come up with some sort of solution. I don't know what yet, but I'm gonna think about it.
Will our hero find his way out of this bind?
I figured out where I went wrong. Then it doesn't look good. I'm gonna try something crazy to try to fix it.
Find out next time on the finale of Project Hail Andy.